November 23, 1943. 26,000 feet above Oldenburg, Germany. Oberleutnant Werner Schroer adjusted his oxygen mask and scanned the formation of B-17 flying fortresses lumbering below like fat cattle waiting for slaughter. Through the plexiglass canopy of his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6, he counted the American escort fighters weaving protectively above the bomber stream. Those massive radial engine fighters the Americans called Thunderbolts. His wingman's voice crackled through the radio, laughing about the ungainly American design. "Look at them, Herr Oberleutnant. They are as wide as bombers. How can they expect to fight with such obesity?" Schroer allowed himself a thin smile beneath his mask. German intelligence reports had been clear about the Republic P-47. It weighed over 6 tons empty, nearly twice the weight of his nimble Messerschmitt. Its massive Pratt & Whitney engine made it look like a flying barrel. The Americans had clearly learned nothing about fighter design. What Schroer didn't know, what none of the Luftwaffe pilots forming up for their attack knew, was that within 45 seconds, those ungainly barrels would be screaming past them in near-vertical dives at speeds their own fighters could never achieve. The P-47 Thunderbolt could exceed 550 miles per hour in a dive, entering a realm of physics that German engineers had only theorized about. Before this day ended, 3 of Schroer's squadron mates would be dead, victims of an American fighter that could simply leave combat whenever it chose, dropping like a stone at speeds that made pursuit impossible. The story of how German fighter pilots discovered this terrifying capability began months earlier, rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of American design philosophy. Since 1941, Luftwaffe technical intelligence had been analyzing captured Allied aircraft and developing tactical responses. When reports of the new Republic fighter reached German squadrons in early 1943, the reaction was universally dismissive. Major Gunther Rohl, commanding Jagdgeschwader 11, reviewed the intelligence summary at his base in Husum and reportedly told his pilots during a briefing on March 15, 1943, that the Americans have built a fighter for comfort, not for war. 7,000 pounds empty weight. Think about that, gentlemen. Our Bf-109G weighs 4,800 pounds. They are flying bathtubs. The technical specifications seem to confirm every German prejudice about American aviation. The P-47 measured 40 feet 9 inches in length, with a wingspan of 40 feet 9 inches. Its Pratt & Whitney R2 800 double wasp radial engine displaced 2,804 cubic inches and weighed over 2,600 pounds alone. In comparison, the Bf-109's Daimler-Benz DB605 engine weighed just 1,500 pounds. German pilots had been trained in a doctrine that emphasized lightweight, nimble fighters capable of tight-turning radii and rapid acceleration. The Focke-Wulf Foe 190, their own radial engine fighter, weighed barely 5,500 pounds empty despite having considerable armor and heavy armament. Hauptmann Josef Priller, one of the Luftwaffe's most decorated aces with over 100 victories by mid-1943, received his first detailed briefing about the P-47 on April 28 at his base in Wevelgem, Belgium. The intelligence officer, Oberleutnant Friedrich Keller, presented photographs and specifications obtained through neutral sources. Keller pointed to the aircraft's massive turbo supercharger system, explaining how it required extensive ducting that ran from the engine through the fuselage and back. This alone adds several hundred pounds, Keller noted. The system is complex, vulnerable, and represents everything wrong with American over-engineering. Priller studied the photographs, particularly noting the aircraft's deep fuselage and broad cowling. "It will climb like a sick cow," he concluded, "and in a dive, all that weight will make it accelerate slowly. We will dance around them." This assessment was shared across the Jagdwaffe. General Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's inspector of fighters, issued a tactical directive on May 3, 1943, stating that the new American fighter should be engaged using traditional energy tactics, forcing it into turning battles where its weight would become a fatal disadvantage. The directive, classified as Geheime Kommandosache and distributed to all fighter wing commanders, specifically stated, "The Republic P-47 represents American industrial capability, but not tactical innovation. Its excessive weight, estimated at over 13,000 pounds fully loaded, makes it vulnerable to our standard combat tactics. BF-109 units should engage from above, using their superior climb rate. FW-190 units should force horizontal maneuvering where the American fighter's mass will prevent effective response. The first encounters seem to confirm these assessments. On April 15, 1943, when Major Donald Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group shot down an FW-190 near Dieppe, it was dismissed as a fluke. The German pilot, Unteroffizier Hans Müller, had been separated from his formation and was low on fuel. His wingman, Feldwebel Kurt Ehrenfried, reported that Müller had been bounced while fixated on a straggling B-17. The American fighter's attack was opportunistic, not indicative of superior performance. But troubling reports began filtering back to German intelligence. On June 12, 1943, Oberleutnant Otto Kath of Jagdgeschwader 26 encountered P-47s over Belgium and survived to file a detailed report. The American fighters were escorting B-17s at 24,000 feet when his swarm of 4 BF-109s initiated a diving attack from 28,000 feet. Kath recorded, "We achieved complete surprise, approaching from the sun. I selected the trailing American fighter and aligned for a high-angle deflection shot. At 800 meters, the American pilot must have seen us because his aircraft suddenly nosed over. I attempted to follow, pushing my aircraft into a 70-degree dive. Within seconds, the American fighter was pulling away. My airspeed indicator showed 470 kilometers per hour, yet the distance increased. I continued diving until my aircraft began severe vibration at 520 kilometers per hour. The American fighter was still accelerating away, now just a dot below. Kath's report was initially dismissed by intelligence officers who believed he had misjudged distances and speeds in the confusion of combat. But similar accounts multiplied. Hauptmann Friedrich Geischardt of Jagdgeschwader 2 encountered P-47s on June 26 over Lille and reported, "The enemy formation maintained 22,000 feet, while we held advantage at 26,000 feet. I led my staffel in a coordinated bounce, achieving tactical surprise. As we descended, 4 American fighters simply pushed over into near-vertical dives. We attempted pursuit, but it was impossible. They fell away like stones dropped from a cliff. My airspeed reached 550 kilometers per hour before control forces became excessive. The Americans continued accelerating in dives that must have exceeded 80 degrees. No aircraft should be able to maintain control at such speeds, yet they recovered smoothly at 10,000 feet and zoom climbed back to altitude. The phenomenon Geischardt described was compressibility, something German aircraft designers understood theoretically but had rarely encountered practically. As aircraft approach the speed of sound, localized airflow over the wings can reach transonic velocities, creating shock waves that affect control surfaces. German fighters, particularly the Bf-109 with its thin wings and light construction, encountered severe control problems and structural stress at speeds approaching 550 kilometers per hour. The massive P-47, with its robust construction and thick wings, could push through these effects and maintain control at speeds exceeding 900 kilometers per hour in dives. General Major Dietrich Peltz, commanding assault forces in France, convened a conference on July 8, 1943, to address what he termed the diving problem. Attending were technical officers from Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf, along with operational commanders including Oberstleutnant Egon Meyer and Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of Adolf Galland. The Messerschmitt representative, Dr. Heinrich Beauvais, presented calculations showing that the Bf-109 G6 could theoretically achieve 600 miles per hour in a vertical dive, but structural failure would occur around 550 miles per hour, and pilots would lose control authority well before that point. The P-47, according to captured technical documents, was stressed for 900 miles per hour dives with maintained control authority through specialized control surface balancing. Major Galland spoke from operational experience. On July 2nd, I engaged P-47s near Brussels. We had every advantage: altitude, position, numbers, 12 against 8. When we initiated our attack, the Americans simply dove away. Not a panicked escape, but a controlled tactical maneuver. They knew exactly what they were doing. We followed as far as we dared, but they disappeared downward at speeds we could not match. 10 minutes later, they were back at altitude, having used their speed to zoom climb beyond our reach. We never fired a shot. The tactical implications were staggering. German fighter doctrine had always emphasized energy management, maintaining altitude and speed advantage to control engagement parameters. Now, American fighters could simply exit any unfavorable situation by diving away at speeds German fighters couldn't match. Worse, the P-47 could use these diving attacks offensively, building tremendous speed in high-angle approaches that made them nearly impossible to evade. Oberleutnant Heinz Nock of Jagdgeschwader 11 experienced this firsthand on July 28, 1943. Leading a swarm on patrol near Hanover, he spotted a formation of P-47s 3,000 meters above. Following standard procedure, Nock led his fighters in a climbing spiral, attempting to gain altitude advantage. He later wrote in his combat diary, "The Americans observed our climb, but seemed unconcerned. When we reached co-altitude at 7,500 meters, still 1,000 meters below them, 4 Thunderbolts rolled inverted and dove. The angle was incredible, perhaps 85 degrees. They came down like arrows from heaven. We broke frantically, but their speed was such that deflection shooting was impossible. Feldwebel Müller's aircraft exploded when struck by their .50 caliber fire. The Americans continued through our formation, still diving, and were 3,000 meters below us within seconds. By the time we recovered from our defensive breaks, they were climbing back to altitude 5 kilometers away. The psychological impact on German pilots was profound. Lieutenant Rudolf Rademacher of Jagdgeschwader 54 recalled, "We began to feel helpless. You would see them above, those fat barrels, and know that at any moment they could simply fall on you like an avalanche. You couldn't pursue them down, and you couldn't escape them when they came. Our beautiful 109s, which had conquered Poland, France, and Russia, were suddenly inadequate." German technical intelligence scrambled to understand the phenomenon. On August 15, 1943, a P-47D numbered 42-76258 was shot down relatively intact near Maastricht. The aircraft was transported to the Luftwaffe test center at Rechlin, where it underwent intensive evaluation. Test pilot Hauptmann Hans-Werner Lersch conducted a series of dive tests, progressively pushing the captured fighter to higher speeds. His report, dated September 3, 1943, was revelatory. The aircraft achieves indicated airspeeds exceeding 850 kilometers per hour in 40-degree dives while maintaining positive control authority. In 70-degree dives, indicated airspeed exceeds 950 kilometers per hour. Control forces increase dramatically, but remain manageable. The aircraft's weight, which we considered a disadvantage, actually provides stability in these high-speed regimes. The turbo supercharger maintains engine power even in negative G conditions. Most remarkably, the aircraft recovers smoothly from terminal velocity dives, using its accumulated speed to regain altitude rapidly. Lersch's report included a sobering conclusion. No current German fighter can match these dive performance parameters. Pursuit of diving P-47s should be prohibited beyond indicated airspeeds of 550 km per hour to prevent structural failure or loss of control, leading to ground impact. This directive, issued as Luftwaffe Tactical Order 43/17 on September 10th, fundamentally altered German fighter tactics. Pilots were instructed to avoid following P-47s into high-speed dives, essentially conceding that American fighters could disengage at will. The order was met with frustration and disbelief by frontline pilots who had grown accustomed to holding every performance advantage over Allied fighters. Hauptmann Johannes Naumann of Jagdgeschwader 26 protested to his wing commander, "We are being told to let them go when they dive. We might as well ground our fighters and wave as they fly over." The reality was even worse than Naumann imagined. American pilots had quickly learned to exploit their diving advantage offensively. Captain Walker Mahurin of the 56th Fighter Group developed what he called the Thunder Run, a tactical maneuver that maximized the P-47's diving capability. Starting from maximum altitude, typically 30,000 feet or higher, flights of Thunderbolts would identify German formations below. Instead of maneuvering for position, they would simply roll inverted and dive at angles exceeding 70 degrees, building speeds over 500 miles per hour. The accumulated energy allowed them to slash through German formations with devastating firepower, continue diving to safety, then zoom climb back to altitude before German fighters could react. On October 14, 1943, this tactic was employed to devastating effect during a raid on Schweinfurt. Major David Schilling led 16 P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group in a series of diving attacks against 40-plus German fighters attempting to engage B-17s. Oberleutnant Erwin Leikauf of Jagdgeschwader 54 survived the encounter and reported, "They came from impossible heights, diving at angles our aircraft could not match. We saw them coming but could do nothing. They fell through our formation like meteorites, their 850 caliber guns firing continuously. 4 of our aircraft were destroyed in the first pass. We attempted to dive after them, but it was futile. They disappeared downward at speeds that made our aircraft shake and protest. Within minutes, they were back at altitude, preparing another attack. We lost 7 aircraft and never effectively engaged a single Thunderbolt." The numbers told a stark story. By November 1943, P-47 groups were claiming kill ratios exceeding 4-1 against German fighters. While some overclaiming certainly occurred, Luftwaffe loss records confirm the trend. Jagdgeschwader 2 lost 37 pilots between September and November 1943, with 22 specifically attributed to P-47 engagements. Jagdgeschwader 26 lost 41 pilots in the same period, with P-47s responsible for at least 28. The diving capability affected German morale in ways beyond mere statistics. Hauptmann Heinz Baer, one of Germany's highest-scoring aces with over 200 victories, admitted in a December 1943 interview with Signal magazine, though this portion was censored, "The American Thunderbolt has changed the nature of aerial combat. Its ability to enter and exit battle at will using diving speeds we cannot match means we no longer control engagement parameters. We must wait for them to make mistakes, which becomes less frequent as their pilots gain experience. Technical efforts to counter the P-47's diving advantage proved futile. Messerschmitt proposed strengthening the Bf-109 structure to handle higher dive speeds, but this would add weight, reducing the aircraft's other performance parameters. Focke-Wulf experimented with dive brakes on modified FIRV 190A8s, but these created more problems than they solved, adding drag and complexity without matching American diving speeds. The introduction of the Messerschmitt Me-2 6-2 jet fighter in late 1943 offered theoretical superiority, but even these revolutionary aircraft could not match the P-47's diving acceleration. Oberleutnant Walther Hagener of Kommando Nowotny, one of the first jet units, reported on January 7, 1944. "The jets are faster in level flight, but American Thunderbolts can still escape by diving. Our Me-262 accelerates slowly due to early jet engine characteristics. The Thunderbolt's propeller and weight mean it achieves maximum diving speed almost immediately. By the time our jets match their diving velocity, they have gained such separation that intercept becomes impossible. The psychological warfare aspect of the P-47's diving capability cannot be understated. German pilots who had entered the war confident in their training and equipment found themselves technically outclassed. Lieutenant Günther Josten of Jagdgeschwader 51 wrote to his brother in February 1944, "We take off, knowing the Americans hold every advantage. They fly higher than us, dive faster than us, and have more ammunition than us. We circle below them, like wolves beneath an eagle, waiting for one to make an error. But eagles don't need to come down unless they choose to." American pilots, initially skeptical of their massive fighter, had discovered its extraordinary capability through experimentation and necessity. Lieutenant Robert Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group became one of the war's highest-scoring American aces by maximizing the P-47's diving performance. On November 26, 1943, he dove from 31,000 feet to attack a formation of WWIIs, reaching an indicated airspeed of 575 miles per hour. His combat report noted, "The entire attack sequence lasted less than 20 seconds, from dive initiation to recovery. 2 4-190s destroyed, 1 probable. No German fighter attempted pursuit into my dive. They scattered like minnows when a pike strikes." The technical explanation for the P-47's supreme diving capability lay in several design factors that German intelligence initially dismissed as weaknesses. The aircraft's weight, far from being a disadvantage, provided momentum that overcame air resistance more effectively than lighter fighters. The massive R2-800 engine's torque helped maintain control authority at extreme speeds. The turbo supercharger, mounted in the rear fuselage, helped balance the aircraft during high-speed dives. Most critically, Republic engineers had anticipated transonic effects and incorporated control surface balancing that maintained effectiveness at speeds approaching 600 miles per hour. Dr. Wilhelm Dornier, son of aircraft designer Claudius Dornier, conducted wind tunnel tests on captured P-47 components at the Deutsche Versuchsanstalt für Luftfahrt facility in Berlin-Adlershof. His report, completed March 15, 1944, explained, "The American designers clearly understood compressibility effects from the beginning. The wing thickness ratio of 18%, which we considered inefficient, actually delays critical Mach number. The control surfaces use careful mass balancing and aerodynamic balance tabs that maintain authority at speeds where our fighters become uncontrollable. The entire aircraft is stressed for loads we considered unnecessary, but these allow safe recovery from terminal velocity dives." By spring 1944, the Luftwaffe had essentially conceded the vertical dimension of aerial combat to American fighters. New tactical doctrines emphasized attacking bombers only when escort fighters were absent or engaged elsewhere. When P-47s were present, German fighters were instructed to maintain co-altitude, or lower positions, accepting defensive positioning rather than risk pursuit into American diving attacks. General Lieutenant Josef Schmid, commander of Jagdkorps I, issued a remarkable order on April 22, 1944. Effective immediately, pursuit of Allied fighters, particularly P-47s, into diving maneuvers exceeding 45 degrees is prohibited. Squadron commanders will emphasize horizontal engagement when possible, disengagement when tactical situation becomes unfavorable. Preservation of aircraft and pilots takes precedence over individual victory claims. This order essentially admitted defeat in the vertical performance arena. German pilots who had once ruled European skies through superior tactics and training now found themselves constrained by inferior technology. The impact on morale was devastating. Oberleutnant Hans Waldmann of Jagdgeschwader 52 recalled, "We went from hunters to hunted. Every mission brief included warnings about Thunderbolt diving attacks. We spent more time watching above us than looking for targets. The psychological burden was enormous, knowing that death could fall from above at any moment, at speeds we couldn't match or escape." The production numbers compounded German despair. While they struggled to manufacture 1,000 fighters monthly, Republic alone was producing over 400 P-47s monthly by March 1944. Luftwaffe intelligence estimated that over 5,000 P-47s would be operational in European theatre by invasion time, each capable of diving attacks German fighters couldn't counter. Major Georg Peter Eder of Jagdgeschwader II, who survived 17 encounters with P-47s, provided perhaps the most eloquent summary of German frustration in his post-war memoir. "We had trained for years to perfect energy fighting, maintaining speed and altitude advantage. The Americans simply bought it with industrial might, building fighters so robust they could dive at speeds that would destroy our aircraft. Each Thunderbolt was a flying bank vault, heavy, armored, and impossibly fast when it chose to be. We called them jugs, mockingly at first, but learned they were juggernauts that crushed everything in their path. The diving advantage affected strategic bombing campaigns profoundly. B-17 and B-24 formations, previously vulnerable during bomb runs when forced to maintain steady courses, now had escorts that could respond instantly to German attacks. P-47s would orbit above bomber formations at 30,000 feet or higher, ready to dive on any German fighter that approached. This high-perch tactic made bomber interception nearly suicidal for German pilots. On May 12, 1944, during a raid on Brux, Jagdgeschwader III launched 47 Bf-109s to intercept 400-plus American bombers. The escort included 120 P-47s from 3 fighter groups. Hauptmann Werner Goeth, leading the German formation, later testified at his interrogation, "We climbed to 7,000 meters to attack the bomber stream at 6,500 meters. As we positioned for our approach, Thunderbolts simply fell on us from above. They must have been at 9,000 meters or higher. The first indication was tracers passing our formation, then aircraft exploding. Within 30 seconds, 12 of our fighters were destroyed or diving away damaged. We never reached the bombers. The Thunderbolts continued through our formation, dove below us, then used their speed to climb back above us. It was like fighting gravity itself. The introduction of the P-47D-25RE model in May 1944, with its bubble canopy providing superior visibility, made diving attacks even more effective. American pilots could now maintain better situational awareness during high-speed dives, tracking multiple targets and avoiding collisions. German pilots noted that diving attacks became more precise and aggressive, with American pilots willing to press attacks to point-blank range, knowing they could escape using superior dive performance. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski of the 56th Fighter Group, who became the leading ace in European theatre with 28 victories, perfected what he called the sledgehammer attack. From maximum altitude, he would identify German formations, position upsun, then lead his flight in coordinated diving attacks at speeds exceeding 550 miles per hour. His after-action report from June 7, 1944, described, "Initiated dive from 32,000 feet onto 12 Bf-109s attacking B-24s at 18,000 feet. Achieved complete surprise due to speed of approach. Destroyed 2 Bf-109s in initial pass. Flight destroyed 3 additional. German formations scattered. No pursuit attempted. Recovered at 12,000 feet. Zoom climbed to 28,000 feet in 4 minutes. Germans had descended to 15,000 feet and were disengaging westward. The psychological impact extended beyond fighter units. German bomber crews, particularly those flying Junkers Ju-88s and Heinkel He 177s, found themselves helpless against diving Thunderbolts. Hauptmann Dietrich Puttwagen of Kampfgeschwader 66 reported on June 15, 1944. Our mission to attack invasion beaches was intercepted by Thunderbolts 30 kilometers from target. They dove on us from such altitude we never saw them until tracers were striking our aircraft. Our gunners couldn't track targets approaching at such speeds. 6 aircraft lost in less than 1 minute. Surviving aircraft jettisoned bombs and fled at low altitude. Mission failure complete. The Normandy invasion period showcased the P-47's diving superiority definitively. German attempts to reinforce defensive positions during daylight became impossible. Jagdgeschwader 26, once elite defenders of the Reich, lost 70% of its operational strength in 2 weeks following D-Day, with most losses attributed to P-47 attacks. Oberleutnant Hans Hartigs, one of few survivors, recalled, "We would take off knowing we were already defeated. The Thunderbolts owned the sky from 20,000 feet up. We flew at treetop level, hoping to avoid detection, but they would always find us. When they dove, we could only watch death approaching at speeds our aircraft could never achieve. Technical attempts to develop counter-tactics proved futile. Oberst Gordon Golub, inspector of day fighters, proposed using paired formations, with one element maintaining altitude, while another flew low as bait. This tactic, tested on June 28, 1944, resulted in catastrophic losses when P-47s simply dove through both formations sequentially, destroying 8 German fighters without loss. The introduction of high-octane fuel and water methanol injection in late-model P-47s pushed diving speeds even higher. Test pilot Major James Goodson demonstrated a dive from 35,000 feet in a P-47M model, achieving an indicated airspeed of 620 miles per hour while maintaining control authority. German intelligence, monitoring Allied radio transmissions, intercepted his test report. Test pilot Pierre Klostermann, who flew both Spitfires and P-47s, wrote, "The Thunderbolt was a revelation. In a Spitfire, you flew. In a Thunderbolt, you commanded gravity. The diving performance was intoxicating, knowing you could simply point the nose down and nothing in the Luftwaffe inventory could follow. German pilots must have felt like medieval knights facing artillery for the first time." The lasting impact of the P-47's diving superiority influenced post-war fighter development. German designers, working under Allied supervision, emphasized that future fighters must be designed for transonic performance from inception. Kurt Tank, designer of the FW-190, admitted. We failed to anticipate that combat speeds would approach sound barrier. The Americans, whether through intention or fortune, built an aircraft that operated effectively in speed ranges we considered theoretical. Every German pilot who faced P-47s in diving attacks returned understanding that our entire design philosophy was obsolete. The human cost was severe. Luftwaffe records indicate that over 1,200 German pilots were killed specifically during encounters with diving P-47s between June 1943 and May 1945. Many more were wounded or captured after their aircraft were destroyed in one-sided engagements. The psychological casualties, pilots who lost confidence and effectiveness after facing unstoppable diving attacks, cannot be quantified, but certainly numbered in thousands. Major Johannes Wies of Jagdgeschwader 52 summarized the German experience. We began the war as hunters, stalking bombers with impunity. The P-47 turned us into prey. Its diving attacks came without warning at speeds that made defense impossible. We went from controlling the skies to cowering beneath them, watching for death to fall at 500 miles per hour. The mighty Luftwaffe, which had conquered Europe, was reduced to impotence by American fighters that simply fell faster than anything we could build. The revolution was complete. The same German pilots who had laughed at intelligence photos showing the corpulent American fighter were either dead, captured, or thoroughly defeated by war's end. The P-47's ability to dive at speeds exceeding 550 miles per hour had transformed aerial combat from a contest of skill into a demonstration of industrial and engineering supremacy. In his final interview before his death in 1996, General-Lieutenant Adolf Galland reflected, "We entered the war believing fighter combat was about agility, pilot skill, and tactical superiority. The Americans taught us it was about physics, production numbers, and engineering margins. The P-47 could dive at speeds that would destroy our fighters because it was built to survive forces we never imagined necessary. Every Thunderbolt diving through our formations at 500 miles per hour and calculated that such speeds represented Mach 0.82, approaching the theoretical limits of propeller-driven aircraft." General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland, in his final tactical assessment dated January 15, 1945, admitted complete defeat in the vertical performance arena. The American Republic P-47 has redefined aerial combat through its diving capability. Our pilots face an enemy that can engage and disengage at will, attacking from altitudes we cannot reach, at speeds we cannot match. Traditional energy fighting tactics are meaningless when the enemy possesses unlimited energy through superior diving performance. We must acknowledge that American industrial design has produced a fighter that negates every advantage upon which our tactics were based. The numbers by war's end were staggering. P-47s flew over 546,000 combat sorties in European theatre, claiming 3,700 aerial victories against 3,400 losses from all causes. The majority of aerial victories came during diving attacks that German fighters couldn't counter. More significantly, the psychological impact of facing an untouchable enemy eroded Luftwaffe effectiveness beyond what statistics could capture. Post-war interrogations revealed the depth of German respect for the P-47's diving capability. General-Lieutenant Wolfgang Pickett stated, "We entered the war believing American aircraft would be comfortable but ineffective, reflecting their decadent society. The P-47 proved Americans understood warfare perfectly, building aircraft that maximized their industrial advantages. Its diving performance was not accidental, but carefully engineered superiority that rendered our fighters obsolete." Major Erich Rudolpher, who survived over 1,000 combat missions and scored 222 victories, provided perhaps the most honest assessment. The Thunderbolt changed everything. Before, altitude meant advantage. After, altitude meant vulnerability to diving attacks we couldn't escape. We joked that P-47s weren't aircraft but falling safes, except safes would be easier to shoot down. They would whistle down on us like demons, 8 guns blazing, then climb away before we could react. We learned to fear clear skies because Thunderbolts could be watching from heights we couldn't see. The technical analysis continued after war's end. Soviet engineers, examining captured German and American fighters, concluded that the P-47's diving superiority represented a paradigm shift in fighter design. Their report, dated August 1945, stated, The Americans achieved through brute force engineering what others attempted through finesse. The Republic P-47's massive construction, initially appearing crude, actually represented sophisticated understanding of high-speed flight dynamics. German fighters, optimized for conventional combat, became obsolete against an opponent operating in speed regimes they couldn't achieve. French America showing us that our entire conception of aerial warfare was antiquated. They didn't outfly us. They simply operated in performance realms we couldn't reach. The transformation from dismissal to defeat took barely 18 months. From the first mocking intelligence assessments in early 1943 to complete tactical paralysis by summer 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered that their lightweight, agile fighters were relics facing an opponent that had redefined the vertical dimension of aerial combat. The P-47 Thunderbolt's devastating diving capability had turned German confidence into desperation, superiority into survival, and ultimately, derision into defeat. Oberleutnant Werner Schroer, who had smiled at his wingman's joke about American flying barrels on that November day in 1943, survived the war with 114 victories. In his memoirs, published in 1985, he wrote a single line that captured the German experience perfectly. The Thunderbolts taught us that in modern war, the heaviest fighter wins if it can dive faster than death itself.